Hi students, welcome to the business level capstone module. So other class එකේ අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලාම කතා කරන්න යන්නේ business level capstone එකේ ඕගොල්ලොන්ගේ syllabus එක මොකක්ද? ඕගොල්ලොන්ගේ syllabus content එක මොකක්ද? ඒත් එක්කම අපේ plan එක මොකක්ද මේ syllabus එක tackle කරන්න. because මේ syllabus එකෙන් ඕගොල්ලොන්ට unseen case study එකක් තියෙනවා. ඕගොල්ලන්ට face කරන්න තියෙනවා power and integrity skills assessment එකක්. ඕගොල්ලන්ට ඒ වගේම verbal pitch එකකුත් face කරන්න තියෙනවා. So for all of this we need to cover the business level capstone syllabus. So එකත් එක්ක අපි බලමු ඕගොල්ලෝගේ syllabus එකේ මොනවද cover කරන්න තියෙන්නේ කියලා. So ඕගොල්ලෝගේ syllabus එකේ 5 areas තියෙනවා. මේකට the learning leads කියලා කියනවා. So 5 learning leads අපිට cover කරන්න තියෙනවා business level capstone module එකට. මේවා තමයි ඕගොල්ලෝගේ learning leads. පළවෙනි එක operations management process improvement and efficiency. So මේක focus කරන්නේ කර්මාන්තයක කළමනාකරණය ගැන. And ඒ කළමනාකරණය කොහොමද අපි ඒ processes improve කරන්නේ වැඩි දියුණු කරන්නේ කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම ඒවා කොහොමද අපි efficient කරන්නේ. නිකන් අපිට process එකක් activity එකක් තිබ්බට හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක කොහොමද අපි වැඩිපුර හොඳට කරන්නේ කියන එක තමයි අපි පළවෙනි chapter එකෙන් බලන්නේ. ඕගොල්ලන්ට ඒත් එක්කම පේනවා ඇති chapter A එකට ලොකු weightage එකක් හම්බෙලා තියෙනවා syllabus එකේ. මුළු syllabus එකේ භාගයකට කිට්ටු වෙන්න weight එක focus එක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ මේ පළවෙනි chapter එකට. So මේකේ අපි theory areas ගොඩක් cover කරනවා. අපි ගොඩක් frameworks ගොඩක් theory ඉගෙන ගන්නවා. So ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ focus එකත් වැඩිපුරම මේ chapter එකට යන්න ඕනේ. ඒත් එක්කම අපි බලමු ඊළඟ chapters වල. ඊළඟට අපි ඉගෙන ගන්නවා data analysis and decision support for operations. කොහොමද අපේ මේ කර්මාන්තයේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ එන දත්ත ඒවා අපි ඇනලයිස් කරන්නේ අපි ඒවා ස්ටඩි කරන්නේ කොහොමද ඒ ස්ටඩි කරපු දත්ත වලින් how can we make operational level decisions අපි කොහොමද සමහර තීරණ ගන්නෙ so ඒක තමයි අපේ second chapter එකෙන් අපි බලන්නේ and to the third chapter we go and we have to look at technology and automation at operational level අපිට මේ ව්‍යාපාරයේ at the operational level at the foundation level මොනවාද අපිට use කරන්න පුළුවන් අලුත් තාක්ෂණය අපිට කොහොමද අපි එදිනදා කරන වැඩ නව තාක්ෂණය use කරලා ඊට වඩා හොඳට කරන්නේ how can we do it better and අපිට මොනවාද මේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න තියෙන්නේ what are the types of technologies we can use ඒ වගේම අයි අපි ඒ technology එක select කරගන්න ඕනේ ඒ ඔක්කොම අපි third chapter එකෙන් cover කරනවා ඒත් එක්කම අපි එනවා අපේ අන්තිම chapters දෙකට chapter D tactical execution and chapter E connecting the functional dots so ඔයගොල්ලෝ පේනවා ඇති මේ chapters දෙකට weightage එක ඉතාමත් චූටි ඒ වුණාට they still very important so anyways through this syllabus we'll be covering all of these 5 learning leads අපි මේ learning leads පහම cover කරනවා අපි ඊළඟ එන classes වල හැබැයි වැඩි focus එක අපි දෙනවා chapter A එකට ඒකෙන් ලොකු weightage එකක් ඔයගොල්ලෝගේ exam එකට එන හින්දා හරි so ඒකත් එක්කම අපි යමු chapter A එකට අපි මේකෙන් start කරනවා අපේ first lesson එක ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ syllabus එකේ දැන්ට උඩින් බලුවාම හරිය අපිට lessons 5ක් වගේ තමයි cover කරන්න තියෙන්නේ but නෑ ඒ lessons 5 ඇතුලේ ඒ learning leads 5 ඇතුලේ there are sub areas අප මම පෙන්නුවොත් chapter A එකේ ඕගොල්ලන්ට cover කරන්න තියෙනවා මේ 8 sub areas for chapter A අපි ඊළඟ classes ටිකේ මේ areas ටික තමයි cover කරන්නේ so අද අපි ඒත් එක්ක බලමු පොඩි introduction එකක් මේ chapter එකට. ඒක තමයි අද class එකෙන් cover වෙන්නේ. Introduction to business operations management. So අමුතු වචන ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. සමහර වෙලාවට ඔයගොල්ලන්ට අලුත් වචන වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේවා. කමක් නැහැ. අමාරු දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. Let's tackle this step by step. අපි පියවරින් පියවර බලමු මොකක්ද මේ කියලා. And since this is a big chapter for us. We need to make sure that we understand everything in this chapter. And my chapter is product theory heavy. put a boring way, but ඒ වුණාට since there is a lot of theory, we'll be covering all of that. So, අපි යමු පළවෙනි chapter එකේ පොඩි introduction එකකට. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කිව්වා මම හිතන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ මතකයි අපේ chapter එකේ අද අපි cover කරන්නේ පොඩි හඳුන්වා දීමක් introduction එකක්. ඒකට යන්න කලින් අපි බලමු මොකක්ද මේ business operations and management කියන්නේ කියලා. So y'all know any business ඕනම ව්‍යාපාරයකක there are certain activities that happen. එක processes තියෙනවා. There are activities, there are processes that happen. So all of these processes can be broken down into 3 levels of management. කළමනාකරන කොටස් 3කට කඩන්න පුළුවන්. So that's what I've given here in the pyramid. මේ pyramid එකෙන් පෙන්නන්නේ ඒ 3 තමයි. So to start off with the bottom. අපි පල්ලෙහාම පටන් ගත්තොත් අපිට තියෙනවා first level එක operational management. මේක අපි ගත්තොත් operational management කියන්නේ the foundation flow. අපි ඒක මෙතන fill in the blanks එකේ ලියාගමු. The foundation flow. So මෙතන තමයි ඇත්තටම the actual work happens at the operational level where the day-to-day activities of a product, a good or a service මොකක් හරි නිෂ්පාදනයක් වෙන ඒ ඔක්කොම වෙන්නේ මේ operational management නැත්නම් foundation flow කියන එකේ. මේක තමයි මූලාරම්භය. ඒකත් එක්ක අපි යනවා ඊළඟ level එකට. The next level is හරි. ඒකත් එක්ක අපි යනවා අපේ lesson එක start කරන්න. අපි බලමු lesson එකට ඉස්සෙල්ලාම යන්න කලින් operations management වලට යන්න කලින් what is business operations and management? මොකක්ද මේ operations and management කියන්නේ කියලා. So in every company there is some sort of activity process happening. ඕනම ව්‍යාපාරයක මොකක් හෝ යම් දෙයක් සිද්ධ වෙනවා. So ඒ කළමනාකරණය ගැන තමයි අද අපි කතා කරන්න යන්නේ. So ඒ කළමනාකරණය can be broken down into 3 levels. That's what I've given here, the 3 levels of management. Let's see what these 3 levels are. So in the pyramid at the bottom, අපිට යටින්ම තියෙනවා operational management. ඊට පස්සේ we have managerial management and finally we have strategic management. So these are the 3 levels of management. කළමනාකරණය levels 3ක වෙනවා. So that's what we are looking at right now. So to start off with the strategic management. අපි උඩින්ම පටන් ගත්තොත්. Strategic management is called the vision flow. අපි vision එකක් කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? Vision එකක් කියන්නේ දැක්ම නේද? It can be a vision of a person, මිනිස්සෙක්ගේ or of a company. So the strategic management is the vision flow. At this level what happens is the company's executives, company එකේ leadership එක owner වෙන්න පුළුවන්, board of directors වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒගොල්ලෝ decide කරනවා. They decide what is the direction that I want to take with this company. What are we going to sell to the customers? How are we going to position our company in the market? How are we going to compete with other competitors? So all of those decisions are made at this vision flow at the top level. So from this level it comes down to the next. එතනින් අපේ ඊළඟ level එකට එනවා. The managerial management. මෙතෙන්ට අපි කියනවා the coordination flow. Coordination කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි coordinate කරනවා කියන්නේ සම්බන්ධ කරනවා වගේනේ. So that's exactly what happens here. At this level, the strategic level and the operation level is connected. So what happens at the second level is that whatever the vision අපේ company එකේ leaders ලා අපිට දීපු දැක්ම ඒගොල්ලෝ කියනවා හරි අවුරුදු 5කින් අපිට මෙතෙන්ට තමයි යන්න ඕනේ අපිට we want to become a brand that is well known by everyone in the market so ඒක තමයි අපේ දැක්ම that is defined by the leaders or the executives of the company from that the managerial management or the second level what they do is they connect to understand what needs to be done on an operational level. On a day-to-day basis, what tasks, what activities needs to be carried out to achieve that strategy. So that coordination, that connection is brought through this managerial level. And then finally, we come to the operational management, which is called the foundation flow. So flows tunai, vision flow, coordination flow and foundation flow. So foundation flow කියන්නේ අපේ මූලාරම්භය. So ගේක වුණත් අපි foundation එක බඳින්න ඕනේ හොඳට හයියට because that's what everything relies on. All of these other levels are depending on this foundation level. Because this is where the actual work happens. This is where the day-to-day work happens. Whatever the vision that is given by the leaders, whatever the coordination done by the middle management, it all comes down to how the activities at the operational level is executed. May foundation flow එකේ processes activities වෙන්නේ කොහොමද අපේ products නිෂ්පාදනය වෙන්නේ කොහොමද ඒවල qualities කොහොමද ඒවා customers ලාගේ does it match customer satisfaction all of that depends on the operational management or the foundation flow. So before we go into our lesson today we did a small intro into what are the three levels of management. කළමනාකරණය levels තුනක වෙනවා ඕනම business එක ඕනම ව්‍යාපාරයක and they are the foundation flow, the coordination flow and the vision flow. Okay. With that, let's move on to what's this operations management. මොකක්ද මේ operations management කියන්නේ? So ඔයගොල්ලෝ මේක අහලා ඇති සමහර වෙලාවට ඕන ඔයගොල්ලෝගේ කලින් මොඩියුල්ස් වලත් කතා කරලා ඇති but අපි බලමු operations management කියන්නේ මොකක්ද කියලා. Operations management අපි සිංහලෙන් කිව්වොත් සංඛාරය කළමනාකරණය. මේක තමයි මේ operations management කියලා කියන්නේ. එකෙන් අපි බලන්නේ we look at how a company takes its ingredients, resources, the inputs අමුද්‍රව්‍ය මොන හරි ඕනම කම්පැනි එකක් මොන හරි යම් හෝ අමුද්‍රව්‍යයක් පාවිච්චි කරනෝනේ ඒ අමුද්‍රව්‍ය අරගෙන ඒගොල්ලොන් certain processes activities වලට ඒව දාලා how they come up with the final output final product එක එළියට දාන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා තමයි මේ operations management එකෙන් බලන්නේ. ඉතාමත් කෙටියෙන් කිව්වොත් operations management talks about a lot of processes of how they turn these resources into final goods and services. So that's what operations management is. And this involves 4 key steps. Let's look at what these 4 key steps are. Steps වලටත් වඩා එක 4 key activities. අපි මේව පස්සේ තව වැඩිදුර කතා කරමු. But දැන් අපි චුට්ටක් බලාගමු මොනවාද මේ operations management එක ඇතුළේ තියෙන අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම කරන්න ඕනේ activities 4 කියලා. පළවෙනි එක planning. ඕනෙම දෙයක් before we start anything even in a business you need to have a plan in place. You need to understand okay what am I going to sell, how much am I going to sell. And then you need to organize ඔයාට තියෙන resources අමුද්‍රව්‍ය ඒව ඔක්කොම හරි පිළිවෙලකට organize කරගන්න ඕනේ මේ plan එකට ගැලපෙන විදිහට. Then you need to direct. You need to make sure just because ඔයාට plan එකක් තියෙනවා ඔයාගේ resources තියෙනවා හරි ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් ඔයා එහෙම කරා but ඔයා බලන්න ඕනේ මේව හරියට වෙනවද කියලා. So that's what directing means. And then you have to control. Control is where you make sure that whatever the plan you set or hari mම මෙච්චර sales turnaround එකක් කරනවා whether you actually achieve it. If not, what you should do. That's what is talked about through controlling. So මේ activity හතරට යන්න කලින් අපි ආපහු පොඩ්ඩක් operations management ගැන එමු. So මම කිව්වා I told you it is the process of converting the ingredients or the resources of a company into final products. Let's take a very basic example. අපි හරිම basic example එකක් ගමු. Let's take a bakery, the normal bakery we all have, close to our house. So every bakery has its inputs. It needs its flour, it needs its sugar, it needs its eggs. So these are all the ingredients. මේවා තමයි මේ business එකට ඕන අමුද්‍රව්‍ය. ඒත් එක්කම they need a chef or someone with the expertise, the skill to also produce this product. And now in the bakery, they have all of these resources. But just because they have them, people won't come and buy goods and services. They won't. Because it has no value, right? They can go to a normal grocery shop and also buy these resources. But a bakery takes these ingredients, put them across a lot of processors and gives a final output. They create value through whatever the process that's going on for these resources, and they give an output with a value addition to the customer. When the customer comes, he's not just buying flour, eggs, sugar, butter. He is buying a final product that's way better than all of these ingredients. So, operations management involves all of these processes. May bakery ඇතුලේ වෙන ඔක්කොම processes මේ ingredients අර final product එකට convert කරන එකට තමයි operations management කියන්නේ. So that's a very basic example for you to understand මොකක්ද මේ operations management නැත්නම් සංඛාරය කල්පනාකරණය කියන්නේ කියලා. So ඒකත් එක්ක අපි යමු ඊළඟට බලන්න. අර මම කිව්වේ කලින් there are 4 key activities. හරි. ඒකත් එක්ක අපි යමු බලන්න මොනවාද මේ 4 key activities under operations management is. I said planning, organizing, guiding or directing and controlling. So when it comes to planning, let's take our same example which is with the bakery. We need to plan what is on my menu, right? If this bakery is yours and you're the owner, වාගේ business එකේ නෝ බලන්න හරි මොනවාද මගේ menu එකේ තියෙන්නේ, what am I going to give or sell? Then you have to look at, okay, how much of customers do I expect to come in, in the peak hours, maybe in the morning and the evening, I might expect a lot. But during the afternoon, not much. So you do that planning and you forecast how much of sales you might have per day. And then you also think, okay, if this is how much of bread or pastries I have to sell, how much of ingredients should I order? Man kochira orders the unknown, the flour, water, eggs. How often should I also order? So you make that plan. So that's what involves in the planning process. Then you go into the organizing. So now you have, the ingredients coming in. You have maybe a chef or two coming to work in your bakery. Now you need to organize these resources. Just because you have the resources doesn't mean they'll, the final output will come. You need to plan. You need to organize these resources in a way, okay, if I have to sell my products in the morning hours, then I might need to get a night shift. Then I'll have to allocate one of my chefs to the night shift. So maybe you'll have to get that labor plan in place with who's going to work in the night shift, how many people working in the day shift. And also you need to organize in terms of, okay, I have so much of flour and egg everywhere lying in my bakery. I need to store them. I need to organize them in a way that it's not wasted. It doesn't, the efficiency is not lost. Or especially in a bakery, it does not get expired or spoiled. So considering these, you need to organize your resources to make sure you achieve that plan you put. So that's step number 2. Coming on to step number 3, directing or guiding. Okay, just because you be like, Hari, you have one chef, you come at 5 in the morning and you start work, you can use these ingredients. Just because that is in place, you organize and all and have a plan doesn't mean it'll always work out well. So you need to make sure, you need to monitor and make sure that it does. So you guide, you make sure that there is no wastage when they use ingredients. Whenever there is something spilled or anything, that's a wastage, right? So you need to make sure that maybe nothing is spilled, everything is used. Or if you're throwing something out, that is also recorded. So you need that kind of directing and guiding to make sure that the quality is given and there is no cost for the business with waste and inefficiency. So that's step number 3. Coming on to the last step, it is where you have to look and understand, okay, is there a gap? I thought I'm going to sell this much of bread for the morning hours, but looks like I've only produced this much. I thought this many customers would come, but they didn't. Or I made this many pastries, but looks like they didn't like it and I couldn't sell all of it. So in the controlling phase, you see, is there any gaps between between my planned performance? Okay, I thought I'll produce this many. Then you can see also, I actually produced this many pastries, but people didn't buy. Maybe they didn't like it, maybe they didn't come back to buy. So there again, you're identifying gaps in terms of your planned performance and your actual performance. So that's the last activity in terms of operations management. So these, remember, operations management involves 4 key activities. They are planning, organizing, directing or guiding, and controlling. And what operations management is, how all the processes that involves converting our ingredients or resources into final goods and services. Okay, so with that, we are moving on to see why is it important? Why is operations management? මේ වගේ කළමනාකරණයක් ඇයි අපිට ඕනේ අපේ business එකේ? So in any business, operations sit at the heart of it. It's called the engine room, or it serves as an engine room. අපි වාහනයක් ගත්තත් මොනවා තිබ්බත්, even we have a sunroof or a voice controlling system, or even if Siri is there, and if there is no engine, we cannot, the main purpose is not served. Engine එකක් නැතුව car එකක් දුවන්න බෑ. ඒ වගේම තමයි operations function එක නැතුව business එකක් දුවන්නත් බෑ. It is what interlinks all the other functions as well. And also, it is important to remember that other functions depend on operations both for strategic direction and the day-to-day support. So, company එකේ තියෙන ඕනම other function එකක්, marketing, HR, finance, they all depend on operations. So that's one main reason why operations management is important. So මේක අපිට අයින් කරලා දාන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. Just because the cost is high, let's get rid of this department. No, you can't do that because it's the heart of every organization. Apart from that, there are some other reasons as well. So one other reason is that it impacts customer experience, or it is the main point that kind of meets the customer expectation. So operations function එකේ තමයි අපේ customer to reach වෙන product එක නිපද වෙන්නේ නේ. That's where it's manufactured, it's made. So customer satisfaction depends on it, based on the quality, how good the product is. So all of it happens in the operations function, so it's important. And then the delivery, how it's delivered, and also the cost incurred to produce this good or service. I mean, let's take the bakery example. You can produce the same loaf of bread for 2 different prices. You can buy the extra good flour, which is very organic, which comes with a very high price. You can buy that. You can buy the organic eggs and all of that, for small quantities from organic suppliers and make the same bread. And also you can, use a normal day-to-day used flour, all-purpose flour, and you can make sure you get a bulk bulk seller for eggs, sugar at a low cost. So it's important to understand that. Okay, with that, we come on to talk about why operations management is important. අපි දැන් කලින් ඉගෙන ගත්තා what operations management is, what are the activities involved in operations management. Now we're going to look at why is it important. So, one main thing is the operations function is the heart of every business. Whatever business you take, ඕනම business එකක් ගත්තොත් operations කියන්නේ it's considered as the engine room of the business. Imagine a car. You have all the fancy things. You have sunroofs, you have voice activating systems, you have the best wheels. Doesn't matter if you don't have an engine, the primary purpose is lost. You cannot drive a car. So just like that, a business loses its purpose. The business loses its purpose if there is no operations function. So it is important to have operations management. Apart from that, another very important reason why operations management is important is that all the other functions, business එක ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා ඇති එක ජාතිය functions තියෙනනේ, finance, HR, marketing, logistics, or supply chain, admin, so many functions. All of these functions depend on operations. Why do I say that? Let's look at this. අපි මේක බලමු වැඩි දුර තව පස්සේ කතා කරන්න. But imagine for HR, for finance, all of these other functions to operate, there needs to be an operations department. Why? Because the main activity happens here. Apart from that, another important reason why operations management is important is because it impacts customer experience. Customer ට යන final product එක හැදෙන්නේ අපේ operations function එකේ, operations department එකේ. So it will depend customer expectations, quality, delivery මේ ඔක්කොම depend වෙනවා අපේ operations function එකේ වෙන processes ඒවා වෙන්නේ කොහොමද ඒ ඔක්කොමත් එක්ක. Another reason why it's important is that it serves as the core function. Usually company එක production එක වෙන තැන තමයි ගොඩක්ම employees ලා ඉන්නේ. ගොඩක්ම cost එක එන්නේ. අපි ගත්තොත් apparel factory එකක් අපේ clothing නැත්නම් අපේ clothing items නැත්නම් අපේ ඕනම product එක නිෂ්පාදනය වෙන තැන manufacture වෙන තැන තමයි factory එකේ තමයි factory floor එකේ තමයි employees ලා වැඩිපුරම ඉන්නේ. That's where all the machines are also, because that's where the production happens, no? So that's where a lot of costs are. Most of the operational costs. And also, most of the assets are also used at the operations function. So most of the resources in the company, apparel factory එකක් ගත්තොත් ඒකට එන materials, laborers ලා, machine, dye, ඕනම දෙයක් වැඩිපුරම වැඩ කරන්නේ operations function එකේ. So at this point only the resources needs to be used efficiently. අපි අපේ ගන්න resources efficiently පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ operations function එකේ. ඒ වගේම ඕනම waste minimize අඩු කරන්නත් ඕනේ. ඇයි මෙතන තමයි ගොඩක්ම cost එක රඳා පවතින්නේ, ගොඩක්ම resources පාවිච්චි වෙන්නේ. So මුළු company එකේම performance එක operations function එක වැඩ කරන විදිහ මත බලපානවා. So the overall business performance depends on it as well. So ඒකත් එක හේතුවක් operations management වැදගත් වෙන. Another reason is it's impacted by many internal and external changes. Just because අපේ factory එකේ මේ product එක හැදෙනවා, අපේ factory එක දුවනවා කිව්වට මදි. එළියේ in the business environment, any changes, any developments has an impact. I'll give you a good example. So back when I was working in the previous company I worked for, they used to make clothes It was in the app. Okay, coming on to reason number 3. It is impacted by many internal and external changes. Business world එකේ corporate world එකේ වෙන changes විතරක් නෙමෙයි internal changes හින්දාත් changes වලින් operations වලට ගොඩක් ලොකු බලපෑමක් තියෙනවා. I'll give you a good example. I was working in a company from the apparel industry. So they used materials, clothing from different countries. They used to buy and to make t-shirts. So it involved most of the Asian countries because it's very cheap, right? The materials from Asian countries is cheap, so they use that to make their t-shirts, all of that. Suddenly, this change came from the customers. It was actually a law from the USA saying that they are not accepting any product that uses Xinjiang cotton. Xinjiang is a province. එක පළාතක් චයිනාවල තියෙන. මේ පළාතෙන් එන cotton වලින් හැදිච්ච කිසිම product එකක් මේගොල්ලෝ USA ඇතුළට ගන්නෙ නැහැ. This law came. This came from the customer end. It was a law. Something that happened in the external business environment. Now, in this apparel company, if this material is used, may cotton වලින් හදලා තියෙන material එක use වෙනවා නම්, now everything is going to get stopped. Why? If the customer is not buying, no point of continuing to produce it. So we'll have to stop it. So because of that change out there, a legal change, a new law that was passed, everything inside the factory floor had to change because, you know, they had to buy new materials. The materials that they had to get rid of it. So there were changes that need to be made. And the new material, maybe the employees had to be trained on this again. Maybe they needed new machinery. It took time. So lot of changes happened due to this one change that's outside. So that's also happening at the operational level. So many factors like customer expectations, technologies, regulations, even competitive pressure will influence operations management. හරියටම ගොඩක් බලපෑම් තියෙනවා ඇතුලේ වෙන දේවල් ඒ වගේම පිටත වෙන දේවල් වලින් operations management වලට. Final reason why this is important because it has a strategic connection. අපි මේක ගැන තව ටික කතා කරමු, but for now remember that operations management should align with both the corporate and the business strategy. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි strategy එකක් කියන්නේ plan එකක් නේ. අපිට යන්න ඕනේ දිහාවක් අපිට achieve කරන්න ඕනේ දෙයකට තමයි අපි strategy කියලා කියන්නේ. So අපිට ඒ achieve කරන්න ඕනේ දෙයට අපි දාන plan එක තමයි අපේ strategy එක. So operations management අපේ company එකේ corporate and business strategy එකත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න ඕනේ. It must align to it. So let's look at this later on. අපි මේක ගැන පස්සේ කතා කරමු. But these are the key reasons why operations management is important. Okay. With that, before we go on to the strategy conversation, let's look at a small example. අපි පොඩි example එකක් ගමු. If you remember, I told that operations is connected to many functions in the business and all the other functions are dependent on this. ඔක්කොම අනිත් functions, finance, HR, admin, they're all dependent on operations. To see this, let's take an example. Okay, so as the example I'm taking, a company that all of y'all know, this is a brand that we miss very much. Okay. McDonald's. What's the basic operations of McDonald's? It is to use these inputs or ingredients and convert them into outputs, which is fast food. So fast and consistent meals. This is the output. මේක තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ අපිට එළියට දෙන product එක. ඒකට ඒගොල්ලෝ ගොඩක් අමුද්‍රව්‍ය, labor, machines පාවිච්චි කරනවා. So that's the whole operations function of McDonald's. Now let's look at some functions across McDonald's and how they are dependent on operations. Let's take the first function, marketing. Every company has a marketing function. What is the purpose of a marketing function? ඇයි අපිට marketing department එකක් තියෙන්නේ? ඒ කියන්නේ ඉන්න අය මොනවද කරන්නේ? අද කාලේ ඉන්න නම් marketing departments ගත්තොත් you must have seen they do a lot of TikToks, they do a lot of videos, they do all of these TikTok dancing trends. That's what you all must have seen. No, a lot of companies even in Sri Lanka, marketing department එක and TikTok හදන එක. But no, yes, that is part of the job. But why do they do that? To promote the product. They're trying to make sure that the customers know, look here, our product is there. So that's the basic function or the core activity of the marketing department or function. So at a strategic level, the marketing strategy okay, now let's look at how operations is connected across these other functions. What's the main purpose or the core activity of the marketing department even for McDonald's? I mean, these days you all must have seen, marketing department in most companies, what they do is they make TikToks, they do these TikTok trends or YouTube videos that they want to go viral. Yes, they do that, but with what objective? It is to promote the product and build customer awareness, to make sure that the customer knows, look here, we have this product. That is their purpose. But can marketing go ahead and execute their strategy saying, build so much awareness, capture this many customers, saying that, okay, McDonald's gives you low prices with consistent quality and it's a very comforting meal. Can they say all of that? If the operations team can't deliver it in the kitchen, that's where the real operations happen at McDonald's. If they can't, deliver quality meals with the same taste, can they say, consistent? No. If they can't, stick to their speed, if they take like 30 minutes, 40 minutes for just one happy meal, can they call themselves a fast food brand? No. So the marketing strategy depends on whether the operations department can deliver what they talk about. Looking at it from a day-to-day level. So the marketing department will post, daily promotions. Now, if you take Pizza Hut, there are so many promotions that you get every day. Don't cook Tuesday, eat out Thursday, so many daily promotions. So they cannot go ahead and do these promotions or any of these ads if the operations teams or the operations cannot handle the demand, cannot handle the orders. So only the ability for them to handle demand, maintain quality, having the process, having the ingredients to do it will determine whether the marketing department can go ahead and talk about these promotions on a day-to-day level. So that's how the marketing function depends on a strategic point as well as a day-to-day point on the operations function. Let's look at the HR function, the HR department. So what do the HR department do? They hire people, they fire people, they give trainings, they take you out on trips. Yes. That is part of the job for the HR department. But why do they do that? Why do they need to hire people? Why do they need to fire people? It's all to support the operations of a business. If, McDonald's is going to open up a new outlet in another country, then they need people for it. They need people in the kitchen, they would need people to deliver. So based on these requirements, they would want to hire more people. So then they'll go ahead and put out their day-to-day work saying, okay, we are hiring from this country, this location. So the activities of the HR department also depends on the operations. For instance, now if HR is going to go and hire people on a shift basis, it's depending on how long the operations is running for. Is this outlet operating 24/7? If the operations team can do it, then to suit that requirement, they have to go and hire people on a shift basis. So the shift schedules, training, performance, all of this depends on the operations needs. That's how the HR department is dependent on operations from a day-to-day point of view. From a strategic point of view, for them to plan the workflow, the workforce, okay, this is our workforce or this is our cadre for this year, for them to go ahead and plan this on an even and annual basis, it all depends on the operations function. How many outlets are we going to operate? How many hours are we going to operate? Are we going to bring in new machinery or are we going to keep people? Are we going to get, robot servers or are we just going to use people? So based on all of these decisions that is made at the operational level, the HR departments or the HR functions strategy as well as day-to-day work will differ. So like that, I've given some examples across the other functions also. So now let's move on to the next point, which is on, if you remember, I told that operations need to have a connection to the company's strategy. Not any strategy, there are two words I told, corporate strategy and the business strategy. Imagine the company is working, company is manufacturing something, ඔහේ මොනාරි හදනවා factory එකේ. හැබැයි මේවා කිසිම දෙයක් connect වෙන්නේ නැහැ company එකේ ownerගේ vision එකට, strategy එකට, plan එකට. Do you think that will work? Will that bring in money? Will that bring in revenue? No. So, it is very important to make sure that operations management, which is about planning, producing, which is the execution, is connected or closely aligned with the overall strategy of a business. And imagine there is a lack of a connection. It's not very connected. Then what happens is, when the day-to-day operational activities are not connected to the strategy of the company, there can be problems, including inefficiencies. කාර්යක්ෂම නැහැ. And then the resources are not allocated in the best possible way. Let's take an example of, a company that's producing phones. So the strategy says, let's take Apple itself. In 2027 or 2026, the strategy is to produce a flipping iPhone. That's the strategy. That's what the business has defined. But on a day-to-day basis, at the operations level, they're still manufacturing the old phones. They've not brought in the machinery needed for the new flip phone. They have not brought in the chips, the technology, the glass needed for it. People are not being trained. The machines are not changed. So then how can they achieve this strategy? So there might be resources, but they're not allocated in the best possible way. And they won't be able to achieve the business goals. So it's important to make sure that operations is connected to the overall strategy of a business, also again at 3 levels. So as you see in this diagram, operations needs to connect at a corporate strategy level, which is the vision. And a business strategy level, and then finally an operational strategy. So now we're talking about operations management. There's something called operations strategy. What is this? Bit confusing, no? Don't worry, we'll look at it later on. Let's look at what corporate strategy is, business strategy is, and operations strategy is. Okay. At the top level, we said we have the vision flow. So similar to that, in the corporate strategy, we look at the vision or the direction of the company. The long-term direction. In another 5 years, in another 10 years, where does the owner of the company want to meet? Where does the board wants to go? So that's what the corporate strategy is about. It'll tell Okay, let's take an example. The example I've given here, the example we're taking is Nike. So at the corporate strategy level, they define, okay, Nike is a brand. It's a lifestyle brand for athleisure wear. They don't go producing something that's not relevant, like, ripped jeans or office wear. No. They have defined their corporate strategy saying, we are strictly producing athletic performance wear. It can be clothing, it can be any other accessories or equipment, but only stick to this. The direction is given through the corporate strategy. That's what the corporate strategy is at a very high level, what the company is doing, where they want to go. Next, we have the business strategy. So here, they decide, okay, we know what we are going to sell, but how are we going to sell it? How are we going to be better than everyone else in the market? Now if you take that leisure market, there are so many other brands, right? You have Adidas, you have Puma, so many others. So how can Nike position themselves against their competitors? So that is what is discussed at the business strategy. Here, they look at how they can build a competitive advantage. Are they going with a lower cost? Or are they going with a superior quality? Or are they going to say, look here, we are making clothes out of plastic, so we are saving the world. So that's also part of the business strategy, where they are trying to differentiate themselves from the competitors. So if we take Nike, they are saying they will offer innovative, high performance and stylish products. That's their business strategy. And then operations strategy is how the business uses its resources and processes to support this business strategy. Okay. Now, in order for us to be competitive and give the best innovative products, how are they going to use the resources? That's what this strategy defines. Now, I'll give you an example. Nike produces clothes using actual plastics. Plastic that we throw is converted into material, synthetic material, and they use it in their clothing. So, that's their business strategy, right? To use waste to make clothes. Now, the operations strategy need to be in line to support this business strategy. If operations don't have the machines to do it, machines that to make clothes, to stitch clothes out of plastic, they cannot execute this business strategy. No. So they need to have the machines in place. They need to have the technology in place. They need to train the employees. Maybe this material is thicker than the normal cotton. So they need to give extra training for these to work with this new material. So the operations strategy talks about how they are going to achieve this business strategy using the resources and the processes in the business. Okay, now we looked at the 3 types of strategy in the business. Now even you might be wondering, we started the lesson talking about operations management. Now we're talking about operations strategy. What's the difference? Both look like the same, sound like the same. No. Let's look at the difference. So operations strategy, we learned it's there to support our business strategy. So it's in line with the corporate strategy, the long-term vision of the business. Nike's long-term is to be a lifestyle athletic brand which is stylish, which is edgy and high performative. So that's their corporate strategy. What's their brand strategy? How are they going to be better than the competitors? They use sustainable products, they use high performance, they use innovative technology. So that's how they set their business strategy. And now the operation strategy, they set it to support the business strategy. So it focuses on what are the resources, the processes and the capabilities needed to support the long-term decisions. So the operations strategy aligns with the corporate and the business strategy, and it helps to decide, okay, if we are getting there one day to produce clothes made out of plastic, we might need to train the employees. We might need to change the machinery. We might need to use some other type of dye or coloring mechanism. So those decisions is what operations strategy is. And what's the connection between operations strategy and management strategy is that operations management is that to achieve this strategy, what do they have to do on a daily basis? You know, maybe they have to give a couple of hours of training in terms of stitching with or working with this new garment, or they need to buy the machines and train the employees to use the machines. So whatever daily activities that are required to achieve this operations strategy is what falls under operations management. So under operations management, the strategy is put to action with the day-to-day activities. So that is what operations strategy and operations management is. Okay, with that we move on to the next part, which is on operations management fundamentals. So මෙතන අපි බලන්නේ මොකක්ද අපේ මේ operations management සංකල්ප කල්පනාකරණයට පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් හරිම basic tool එක නැත්නම් model එක මොකක්ද කියලා. So there is a tool and it's called the input process output transformation model. So it's a very basic 3-step model, don't worry. Yes, I know the name of the model is very long, input process output transformation model. This is what they call it. But very basically what it means is, it's the process how the business takes its inputs, අමුද්‍රව්‍ය ටික, and transforms වෙනස් කරන්නේම through a process and create output. අවසාන product එක නැත්නම් goods or service කොහොමද manufacture කරන්නේ using the inputs. So that's what this model is about, and it has 3 steps. The inputs, all the resources. Now if we took that bakery example, the flour, the eggs, the sugar, the yeast, the employee, the chef, those are the inputs. So that's the first part of the model. Then we have the process. It's the baking. Before the baking, we have to sift the flour, we have to beat the eggs, we have to mix everything. Those processes, do they do it with a machine? Does the chef do it? And how do they bake it? Do they have one big oven to bake everything in? Or do they have tiny ones? So the processes, which is the value adding activities. So these activities is what take the resources and convert them to the final goods, which is our 3rd step or the 3rd part of the model of the input process output transformation model. So this is the basic model that's used in operations management. Now, with that, we're going to look at why is this model important. So a very good reason why it's important is because it helps us understand how value is created. For instance, අපිට ඒක තේරුම් කරනවා කොහොමද මේ business එකේ value creation එක වෙන්නේ. අපි කොහොමද මේ resources අමුද්‍රව්‍ය අරගෙන final output එක එළියට දාන්නේ. So that is understood using this model. And also, it helps us to understand how the other functions are connected. For us to do the input process output, we need people and culture. We need to make sure that we have the right people with the right skills. And we need to make sure that they're motivated well to do so. So that's from an HR point of view. From finance, we need to understand we have the budgets to buy the machines, to buy the raw materials. We need the budget and the money. And then from a communications point of view, we need to understand communications and marketing point of view, we need to understand that, okay, just because we make the product, if nobody knows that this product is there, nobody will buy it. So that the marketing team does their job in terms of creating awareness with the customers to make sure that the product is being bought. So this model helps us understand how all the other functions are also interconnected to the operations process. And finally, another important thing is it helps us get customer feedback, because this is important, right? Imagine, let's take the phone industry. What happened with Nokia? Back then, they were the leaders, right? With the small button phones. There was nobody to challenge them. They were the leaders. They were producing but the same thing. There was less innovation. They didn't try to do new things. They didn't really go and ask the customer, do you like the product? Is there anything that you want to improve? No, they kept on producing the same thing until somebody out there came up with a better product. So what happened? They lost their sales. Just because you're producing, doing what you know, doesn't guarantee long-term success. For that, you need to continuously improve. Every business, it's like that. So you need to get customer feedback, and it's important, and it's included in this model. So it makes this model even more important. So this is the fundamental model that is used in operations management to create value. Very basic: input, process, output. With that, we move on to the next part, where we're now going to look at, yes, operations happen. මේක processes වෙනවා හැම company එකම ඇතුලේ. හැබැයි හැම company එකම it's not the same. It will differ from company to company. Why? Because some companies produce physical, tangible goods that we can touch and feel. But some companies produce goods, not goods, but services that you cannot touch and feel or sometimes even see. For instance, now, if you go to CASriLanka and so before I come there, there are companies who produce products with physical goods, companies that produce intangible experience or value. You can't see, you can't touch, you can't feel, but you know you got something. And there are also companies that produce both of these. They'll have a product as well as this intangible experience. So it's important for us to understand how operations change with these two types of final products. Now let's take CASriLanka, what I mentioned before. Well-known brand in Sri Lanka. They have the physical good that you can touch and feel, you can take home, you can use it, all of that. And you can also use their services in terms of a massage, in terms of a cleanup, whatever it is. So there are both. So it's important to understand how a company's operations change based on the final output. Whether it's a good that they can physically touch, see and feel, or it's an intangible experience, which is a service. So what I thought was, rather than just reading through our theory, let's take a well-known brand as an example. Now, I've taken here Apple, which is very much product based, where you get an output, you get a product that you touch, feel, see, everything. And you take Starbucks, which is a service and a product, where people go there for the ambience, for the aesthetics, and also for the coffee. But for Apple, you go to the store to buy the product. Let's look at, across these two brands, how the operations change. So obviously the first thing is output. Output is different because for Apple, they provide goods that can be touched and felt, like iPhones, MacBooks, AirPods. Whereas when it comes to Starbucks, they give you a service in terms of a warm customer experience and also a personalized experience with a product that you can touch and feel as well, which is the coffee or the little snacks you can buy. So that's for Starbucks in terms of the output. Next, the customer interaction. So at an operations level, the customer interaction is very low. where production happens somewhere in a factory in China. You know, some parts are made in China, some parts are made in India, and then all of that is assembled in the USA. We don't see that. We just get the final iPhone that, you know, you buy from an Apple store or any other store. So the customer interaction is very low during the production process. But when you come to Starbucks, customer interaction is very high, because from the moment you step into the register, you tell how you want your coffee made, even if it's a huge list or even it's a very short order. You're involved. You're saying how much of milk you want, how thick you want it to be, do you want sugar or not, do you want any flavors or toppings. So the customer is involved in every step of the production process. So it's very high. So that's on a customer interaction. Next is on inventory management. So when it comes to Apple, you can store the finished products. Even if you finish manufacturing, you can keep it stored, you know, until you ship it to some other Apple store and you want to sell it off. But when it comes to Starbucks, can you really store, make coffee and keep? No, you can't do that, because it's based on the customer's requirement you to do it. If one day, you know, it's a very lousy day where there are very less customers, the staff will be idling. So you cannot just store this and keep just because it's not used. So the inventory management is different. Production and consumption. So here, when it comes to a product, it's different. Production happens before consumption, and there's a huge time period between the time of production and consumption. But when we come to Starbucks, it's then and there, you know. You give your requirement, production happens with the barista a couple of steps away from you, and then in a couple of minutes you get the product as well. And here, not just the product, you get the service. Imagine you get a good barista who is experienced, you get a very high quality product. If you get a trainee, then it might differ. So in a company where the service and the product both happens, it happens simultaneously, production and consumption. Quality. Okay, like I mentioned before, Apple, once the Apple phone is made, or the iPhone or the iPad, it can go through a process to check the quality. Are all the parts installed? Are the buttons working? You know, is the camera as good? Are there any scratches? All of this can be checked, because the time of production and consumption are way apart. But when it comes to the service sector, or the service and product both together happening, it's subjective, based on the barista you get in this instance, and also based on the customer. From customer to customer also it might change. Now imagine you go to Starbucks and, you know, you're feeling really good, but your barista is having a really bad day. So, you know, he's grumpy, he's not warm. So the service you get is poor compared to a person who comes in the next shift where there is a bubbly barista who is very warm, who is very nice. So quality is subjective, whereas when it comes to a product operations, it can be controlled, because you can inspect, you can test, you can identify the defects, because there's time from the point of production to the consumption. Next, the location of operations. It's centralized, you know. You can say, okay, this part is made in China, this part is made in India, but then it is central to that specific place. But here, especially for a service operations, the production differs, you know. Even in Sparsalon, you have so many stores out there, so it's decentralized. So the service, the production happens in all of these locations. It's spread across. Similar with Starbucks, it's happening across many locations or stores. So this is, you can go through the theory part even in your study text, but what I've done is I've taken two well-known brands to help you all understand how the operations, the activities in terms of operations change when you are a product or a service based company.